In the heart of Charleston, South Carolina, under the golden chandeliers of an old historic mansion, Ethan Whitmore stood in a crisp black suit, his smile polished and his charm dangerously smooth, while his eyes scanned the room for his target, Olivia Winslow, the elegant, widowed owner of the estate, known for her quiet demeanor, generous charity work, and a fortune inherited after the mysterious passing of her husband 2 years prior. Olivia, graceful in every move, yet distant in her gaze, lived a life of quiet luxury and soft isolation, often surrounded by vintage books, loyal staff, and a world that still treated her like a fragile porcelain doll. Ethan had been watching her 4 weeks before that evening, studying her routines, her friends, her habits, the way she always left the gala early, the way she avoided cameras, the way her eyes drifted to the piano in the corner like it held a memory too painful to touch. He approached her not with arrogance, but with gentle confidence, offering her a glass of wine with a simple, "You look like someone who hasn't danced in a while." She smiled faintly, surprised by the sincerity in his voice, and something inside her shifted just slightly, because it had been years since someone had spoken to her without pity. The room blurred around them as Ethan worked his magic, sharing stories that weren't quite lies, but weren't true either. Stories about his small tech startup, about his mother who raised him alone, and about how much he admired women with quiet strength. Olivia listened, intrigued but cautious, though the way his eyes seemed to reflect a sincerity she'd long forgotten made her hesitate less than she normally would. Over the next few months, Ethan wormed his way into her world with well-timed compliments, perfectly framed vulnerability, and consistent presence, dropping off flowers after her meetings, appearing at charity events he once mocked in private, and even learning to play her late husband's favorite song on the piano, just enough to spark her tears during a winter evening by the fire. Everyone around Olivia was surprised by the romance, some quietly skeptical, some openly jealous. But no one dared say a word to her face, not to the woman who still held the town's largest fortune and a certain unspoken sadness. What they didn't know was that behind Ethan's carefully curated gentleman image lay a man drowning in debt, running from failed businesses, and desperate for a way back to the top. He didn't love Olivia, at least. That's what he told himself as he watched her from across the breakfast table, in her silk robe, sipping tea and reading old poetry. He was here for one thing: money. And Olivia, with her inherited millions, estate assets, and naive heart, seemed like the perfect target. He planned every move like a chess player: win her trust, marry her fast, gain access to the accounts, and disappear with enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. One night, while she slept peacefully beside him, he stepped out to the balcony, whispered into his phone, "She's falling for it. I give it 3 more weeks, then I'm out." But what Ethan didn't see in that moment was the soft click of a camera from behind the curtains, the way Olivia stirred ever so slightly, or how her journal had a new entry that day titled, "What Happens When You Let the Spider Walk Into Your Own Web." He believed she was a broken widow, blindly in love, but he didn't know that Olivia Winslow had lived with secrets bigger than his, and that the only reason she hadn't stopped him yet was because she was waiting to see how far he'd go. The wedding was nothing short of breathtaking. A lavish celebration beneath twinkling string lights hung from ancient oak trees. with white roses lining the pathways and soft jazz floating through the air as hundreds of Charleston's elite toasted the unlikely love between the young, ambitious Ethan Whitmore and the elegant, mysterious Olivia Winslow. Guests admired their every move, Ethan's confident posture, Olivia's timeless grace, the gentle way he kissed her hand during their vows, and how she looked at him like he had brought spring back into her long-wintered heart. But behind every smile Ethan offered, behind every whispered, "My love," there was calculation. He watched the caterers, memorized the layout of the estate, noted which guests were too drunk to notice anything, and especially paid attention to the security system near the east wing. As the final toast echoed and the last guest left, Olivia led him up the grand staircase, her hand warm in his, her steps deliberate and calm. The master bedroom was glowing in amber light, rose petals scattered across the bed like in a movie, champagne chilling by the window. Everything picture perfect, but the atmosphere felt too quiet, too still, like the air just before a storm. Ethan closed the door gently behind him, already thinking of the safe hidden behind the portrait in her study and how soon he'd be inside it. But before he could speak, Olivia turned to him and locked the door with a soft click. Her expression shifted from gentle to unreadable as she stepped closer, holding a small velvet box in her hands. "I have something for you," she said, her voice even, her smile ghost-like. Ethan, caught off guard, opened the box. Inside were not cufflinks or a watch, but photographs. His own face stared back at him from a dozen angles, sitting too close to a woman in a red dress, kissing another behind a restaurant, handing off an envelope to a man near a hotel. His heart stuttered as she handed him a second envelope, a printed email thread between him and his friend Mason, detailing the mission, the timeline, and how he planned to drain Olivia dry and vanish before summer. "You really should be more careful with your passwords," Olivia said calmly, walking past him to pour a glass of champagne. "I had a lot of time after Daniel died. Learned some interesting things, like how to track a person without them ever knowing." Ethan stumbled backward, jaw clenched, mask crumbling, trying to gather himself. But Olivia wasn't done. From her nightstand, she pulled out a tiny black recording device and clicked play, and there it was. His voice from a week ago. "She's a sweet old widow, probably lonely. She'll never see it coming." His stomach twisted. "What is this?" he whispered, rage mixed with fear. But Olivia didn't raise her voice. "This is our wedding night, Ethan, and I thought you deserved the truth before we went any further." She sat gracefully on the edge of the bed, her eyes locked onto his. "I knew who you were the day I met you. You think I didn't notice the lies? The way you changed your story about your mother, the fake startup. I've seen con men before, but none who played the long game like you. Impressive, really." He tried to deny it, to stammer something about love, about how it was real. Now, but Olivia held up her hand. "Don't insult me with a script. I let you in because I wanted to see what a man like you would do when he thought he had everything." She stood up again, walked over to the closet, and pressed her hand against a hidden panel that slid open to reveal nothing. "This is where the safe used to be. You would have broken into it tonight, wouldn't you?" Ethan was silent. Olivia continued, "I moved everything a month ago. Not just the valuables, the documents, the keys, the passwords. You see, Ethan, the moment you put that ring on my finger, you stepped into my game. He tried to grab her arm, but she didn't flinch. From her other hand, she pulled out a folded document. You signed this, thinking it was the catering agreement. What it really says is, if our marriage ends for any reason caused by deception, you walk away with nothing, not a cent. His face turned pale. This isn't legal. It is, she replied smoothly. And I have your recorded consent from the night we signed contracts together. You really shouldn't drink so much when you're scheming. He turned toward the door, ready to storm out, but she spoke once more. One more thing, Ethan, the cameras. He stopped. What? Olivia stepped over to the wall and pressed a button. The flat-screen TV lit up, revealing surveillance footage, him snooping through drawers, whispering into his phone, reading her emails at night. Every room is wired. Every word, every look, every step you've taken in this house. I've seen it. His fists clenched as the weight of the trap around him sank in. Why didn't you stop me earlier? He hissed. Olivia stepped forward, face inches from his. Because I wanted you to see what real power looks like. You married me for money, Ethan, but what I gave you was a mirror. She handed him a final sealed envelope. You'll want to read this in private. Without another word, she left the room, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a queen walking off a battlefield she had already won. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The bedroom that once felt like a throne now felt like a prison cell, dressed in silk sheets. The walls felt tighter, the air colder, and the silence heavier than ever before. He stared at the sealed envelope Olivia had handed him, part shame, part curiosity, kept him from opening it until the morning sun crept through the tall windows. With shaky fingers, he finally tore it open. Inside were two documents. One was a newly updated will, the other was a notarized prenuptial agreement. He scanned the pages, hoping for a loophole, a flaw, anything, but it was airtight. Olivia had cut him off from everything, her money, her estate, her future. The prenup clearly stated that if the marriage ended due to deception or infidelity, he would receive nothing. She had even transferred her fortune to a foundation in her late husband's name, locking the assets behind a board of trustees she personally selected. There was no money to take, no assets to touch. Not anymore. Panic started to rise in his chest like smoke, filling a room with no windows. How had he been so blind, so arrogant? He stormed out of the room, determined to confront her, but found the hallway empty, the staff eerily quiet, as if the entire estate had agreed to turn against him. Olivia wasn't in her study, not in the garden, not even in the dining room where she always had her tea at sunrise. Finally, he found her sitting at the piano, playing a soft, haunting tune, one he recognized. It was the same melody he had faked learning to impress her during their courtship. But now, it didn't sound romantic. It sounded like a requiem. She didn't stop playing as he approached. "You've made your point," he said bitterly. "You win." She finally looked up, her eyes calm and unreadable. "This was never a game, Ethan. It was a lesson," he scoffed. "Lesson in what? Humiliation?" She shook her head. "A lesson in trust, in power, and in what happens when you play with someone who's already survived worse than you could ever imagine." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "What now? You just expect me to walk out of here?" Olivia rose slowly, walking past him to her. "Study." "No, you'll stay, but under terms, I decide. In the study, she laid out a stack of documents, legal, bound, and terrifyingly real. You'll sign a statement admitting what you did, the lies, the manipulation. In exchange, I won't go to the police yet. Ethan's throat went dry. This is blackmail. Olivia tilted her head. No, this is insurance. Because I know men like you don't stop unless someone puts a leash on you. As he stood frozen, she continued, and one more thing. The house, the cars, even your phone, all in my name. You don't own anything here, Ethan. You never. Did he back away, anger boiling beneath his skin, but too afraid to explode? She had him cornered legally, financially, socially. His entire image, the charming, successful entrepreneur, would collapse if this got out. So he did the only thing he could do. He signed. With shaking hands and clenched teeth, he scribbled his name across the confession document.
Olivia
Quietly collected the papers, locked them in her safe, and said without emotion, "You may stay in the guest wing until you find somewhere else to go. You'll eat separately, you'll not speak to the staff, and you'll not touch a cent of anything in this house." He turned away, humiliated, destroyed, but a flicker of something else grew in his eyes. Not remorse, but revenge. That night, when she thought he was asleep, he texted someone under a fake name, Plan B, time to move, and deep in the shadows, someone responded instantly, "I'm ready." What Ethan didn't realize was that Olivia had already intercepted that message too. Because she didn't just trap him, she had planned for every way he might try to escape. But what Olivia didn't realize either was that Ethan wasn't the only liar in the house. A new game was about to begin, darker, deeper, and more dangerous than either of them had prepared for. Ethan spent the next 2 days in the guest wing, like a ghost trapped inside a mansion that once felt like a trophy, now turned into a gilded cage, with every corner whispering of how he'd lost. But while Olivia believed her quiet victory had pushed him into silence, she had underestimated one thing. Men like Ethan didn't accept defeat, they repackaged it. And so, when night fell and the estate drifted into its serene hush, Ethan pulled out a hidden burner phone from inside a hollowed-out shaving kit and sent a message to Natalie, his former lover, his co-conspirator, the only person who knew the full extent of his plan. "It's time," the text read. The next morning, Olivia found a surprise visitor at her gate. Dressed in polite tones, confident smile, and soft eyes, Natalie introduced herself as an old friend of Ethan's. Come to check on him. Olivia looked at her carefully. There was something in her eyes that felt off. But Olivia, always 10 steps ahead, let her in. For 3 days, Natalie moved around the estate like a polite shadow, pretending to read in the library, sipping wine by the garden, asking soft questions about Olivia's past, as if trying to gather information unnoticed. But Olivia noticed. She noticed how Natalie always walked near the security panel, how she lingered outside the study, how she glanced at the safe behind the portrait too long. Ethan thought he was being clever, using Natalie as a tool to retrieve what he had lost, the confession, the files, and maybe a few pieces of priceless jewelry for the road. What he didn't know was that Natalie had her own secrets, because the moment Ethan had first whispered the plan to her months ago about seducing the widow, draining her assets, disappearing rich, Natalie had already made contact with someone else, Olivia herself. Weeks before the wedding, Natalie had sent Olivia an anonymous message. "You're being played. Want proof?" Olivia had taken the bait, and what followed was a dangerous but brilliant alliance between two women who knew the games men played far too well. So when Natalie walked into that house, she wasn't just Ethan's backup, she was Olivia's last trap. On the fourth night, Ethan and Natalie met secretly in the wine cellar. "We'll break into the study at midnight," he whispered. "The cameras near the safe are offline from 12:03 to 12:07. We get in, we grab the files, we vanish." Natalie nodded, kissed his cheek, and hid a tiny microphone deeper in her bra. At exactly 12:03 a.m., they crept through the west hallway. Olivia watched them on her private monitor, the one wired into a completely separate network Ethan never found. She didn't stop them, not yet. She let them reach the study, watched them fumble with gloves and whispers, and the moment Ethan's hand touched the safe handle, a soft click echoed behind them. The lights flared on. Olivia stood in the doorway, flanked by two private security officers, her expression calm but devastatingly cold. Ethan froze, heart slamming, but before he could speak, Natalie stepped away from him, pulled out her hidden mic, and said, "Got everything, including the part where he says he planned the wedding for money." Ethan's jaw dropped. "What, Natalie?" He choked. "You betrayed me." She smiled gently, almost apologetically. "You betrayed everyone, Ethan. I just changed sides before the ship sank." Olivia stepped forward, dropped a file onto the table. Inside were screenshots of every message, audio files of every secret call, even photos of the burner phone. "I told you I had cameras, Ethan," she said softly. "I never told you how many." His shoulders slumped. "You set me up," he muttered. "No," Olivia replied. "You set yourself up. I just let you finish the story you started." The security guards approached, but Olivia stopped them. "I won't press charges yet," she said to Ethan. "You still have one more decision to make, and one more truth to face. Because everything you've done so far wasn't even the worst part." Ethan looked up, confused. Olivia turned to Natalie and said gently, "Tell him." Natalie stepped forward, a strange mix of pain and victory in her eyes. "Olivia didn't just trap you for herself," she said. "She helped trap you for me. Because 2 years ago, Ethan, when you scammed me, stole my savings, and disappeared, I almost lost everything." Ethan's eyes widened. "That was you," he whispered. Natalie nodded. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you." And neither did Olivia. She was the only one who believed me back then. The only one who saw past your lies. So we built this together. This wasn't just a trap, it was justice. Ethan stood there, powerless, every wall of illusion crumbling around him. For the first time in his life, he had no one left to trick, no door to run through, no lies to hide behind. And Olivia simply turned her back, walked away, and left him standing there, broken, as the mansion, her mansion, returned to peace. Ethan had never known true silence until now. Not the silence that came when a room emptied, but the kind that lived inside the soul, heavy and constant, like a punishment you carry alone. After the confrontation in the study, Olivia had given him exactly 48 hours to pack and leave the estate. No police, no headlines, no public scandal, just exile. Natalie hadn't spoken to him since, and even as she left with tears in her eyes, she never looked back. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't angry. He wasn't plotting or pretending. He was simply hollow. He drove through the South Carolina countryside, past moss-covered trees and fading sunlight to nowhere in particular. The mansion grew smaller in the rear-view mirror until it was just a memory, one he couldn't erase no matter how fast he drove. On the second day, he pulled into a small roadside motel where no one knew his name, and the mirror above the sink didn't lie back to him. He stared at his reflection, unshaven, eyes sunken, confidence gone. That night, he opened Olivia's final letter, which he had refused to read until now. Inside was not another threat, not more proof of his failure, but something he hadn't expected: compassion. "Dear Ethan," it read, "I hope someday you learn that the worst prison is the one we build inside ourselves. You weren't born a liar. Somewhere, someone taught you that power mattered more than people, and I became your next target. I don't forgive you, but I do understand you, and I hope you find a way to become more than the man you chose to be with me." He read the letter twice, then a third time. It shook him more than any legal document ever could. He folded it carefully, placed it in his wallet like a scar he wanted to carry. Days turned to weeks. Olivia returned to her old life, hosting charity events, restoring the piano room, tending the garden her late husband once loved. But something in her had changed. She was still calm, still private, but now there was a quiet strength in her smile, the kind that came not from surviving heartbreak, but from defeating it. Natalie, too, had changed. She opened her own foundation to help women recover from financial abuse, using her story, her truth, and even her pain as bricks to build something stronger. One crisp autumn afternoon, weeks later, a letter arrived at Olivia's estate with no return address. Inside was a single sheet, handwritten. "You were right," it said. "The worst prison is inside. I'm working on breaking free of it. Thank you for leaving me with dignity when I deserved none. I hope one day I become someone worthy of the chance you never gave, and someone you'd never need to trap." Olivia held the letter quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply walked outside into the garden and placed the letter under a smooth stone beside a blooming white rose, the flower of forgiveness, but not forgetfulness. That night, she sat at the piano and played not a song of mourning, not one of victory, but something soft, something unfinished, a new melody. Because in the end, this story wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that sets anyone free.